Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this Thursday morning webinar series. I am Chloe Tetra, the coaching lead here with Ready Care. This morning, we're going to be looking at the wild and wonderful world of our inner critic. It's going to be a little bit of a more advanced session on internal work than I usually do, but I do feel that it's a theme that comes up an awful lot with clients, friends, families, self, and worth maybe just a different perspective. So in this particular session, we're going to look at that voice that basically says, you're not good enough, you'll fail, why are you even trying? And the first instinct and advice that's usually out there is to ignore it, suppress it, and treat it as the enemy, that particular voice. So the other perspective that I'll be introducing today is, what if this inner critical voice is actually trying to help in the only way that it knows how? And are there ways that we can delve into it and not away from it that actually brings us greater well-being, greater synthesis in ourselves, and a much more developed taking on of all that we are, rather than going through life ignoring, rejecting, and all the problems that can bring up for it. So I hope that you'll come away from today with a little bit of compassion for yourself, a few tools to better understand yourself and to change the emotional charge of that critical voice. Because essentially, and my thought process with this is, how we emotionally react to specific aspects of ourselves has a huge behavioral impact in our day-to-day lives, and the habits that we have, and who we believe ourselves to be. And who we believe ourselves to be is the driving engine of everything that comes from us. So even though lots of people out there have huge results and benefits from just ignoring and suppressing, the literature shows that actually bringing that part on board with your actions and bringing it into yourself and getting it to work for you instead of against you, that you constantly have this little niggle that you have to force yourself to push away. Why the integration is actually better long term. And we'll take a quick look as to what's actually happening with the niggle and why it can be an uphill battle, because essentially we're basically hardwired to have a negative bias. So it's important to know that having an internal critic is completely normal. It's not a failing on your behalf. Psychology tells us that negative self-talk is a natural feature of the human mind. It's an echo of our brain survival wiring. So our brains evolved with what's called negativity bias, which means that we're inclined to dwell on possible threats or mistakes as a way to protect ourselves. This part is what psychologist Paul Gilbert calls our brain's quote unquote tricky design. When you think, I shouldn't have done that, or if only I knew better, it doesn't mean that something actually is wrong with you, right? And this is the kind of nuance where this is concerned. Is I'm not telling you to listen, I'm not telling you to take on board all of this. What I'm advocating for is a different relationship. So where we go into automatic state, where we hear these things and they're so ingrained in us, which we'll touch on in a minute, they're so ingrained from our past and very kind of emotional moments in our lives that we have a tendency to have a very emotional reaction. We take it on board, we swallow it hook, line, and sinker for whatever it's saying to us. But really, they don't have to mean anything, right? And what I'm inviting is to actually kind of have a meta-awareness. Meta-awareness just means awareness about awareness, which seems quite complicated. But as soon as you hear these things happen, as soon as you hear these messages, the first step is to actually acknowledge that a message has reared its head, right? A critic has reared its head. And where you go from there will dictate an awful lot about the outcomes that you're going to get. So it doesn't mean that you have to believe it. It means your brain is trying to anticipate a danger or pain. It's a hardwiring issue. And I love learning about the systems of our brain and how it works, because it stops you from being a slave to the messages that go out there. If you know that, I don't know, a red light comes up in your dashboard when it's time to put gas in, you now know that the red light is not this big warning that something terrible is going to happen and the car is going to stop. I mean, yes, technically, but the messaging around it is different. It's an alert signal. Okay, now I know that I have to go and get gas. I'm not a driver, as you know, so my car analogies are terrible, and I don't know why they always pop into my head. So it's your inner critic originates from a protective impulse. It's an alarm system. It's a little red light. It wants to avoid failure, rejection, or harm, which you have to remember that your system doesn't differentiate between psychological harm and physical harm. To your system, they're the same thing. It doesn't matter that you'll still be standing if everybody in the room is pointing at you and humiliating you. Your system's going to read that as a horrendous attack. So your system believes that it's pointing out flaws to keep you vigilant and safe. So imagine you have that, let's say, an internal smoke alarm. I'll leave the car analogy go. Its job is basically to alert you of potential dangers. Sometimes it's accurate, like it's going to remind you to prepare for something ahead of time, because you'll say, oh God, I don't want them to think I'm in Egypt now, but I have something ready. That's also a critical voice. But other times it's going to blare out over minor issues. It's going to really, really blame you for something really tiny and very small mistake. So the inner critic is like that. It's a overwrought, oversensitive alarm that always errs on the side of caution. It means well in its own kind of misguided way, but it doesn't always communicate in a helpful, but more importantly, proportionate manner. Makes mountains out of molehills type of thing. So it's a protective message from your past. And this is not a kind of, lying on a psychiatrist's bed saying, my childhood, my parents, etc., etc. No, what I'm trying to say here is childhood matters because it's where your brain develops, right? So the brain develops through repetition. It'll do something first. And then, so for example, it'll create a protective pathway, which I'll explain in a second, because essentially as a child, you don't have, obvious statement, here we go, you don't have the adult capacity to hold difficult, nuanced situations. Lots of adults don't have the capacity to hold difficult, nuanced situations. So a child's mechanisms are basically, I either engage or I hide away. I engage or I hide away. It's the only protection it knows is to, go back into themselves, because it doesn't have the verbal cognitive skills, obviously, that a fully developed prefrontal cortex will have. So looking at past experiences is very important. It's a cliche for a reason, basically, is what I'm trying to say. So the inner critic is formed in our childhood or our adolescence, basically before our prefrontal cortex is formed, in around the age of 21, which I would say mine definitely didn't form at the age of 21, might have been 28 at the earliest, which is a time where where people are extremely vulnerable and dependent on other people's care and approval. So if you're faced with criticism, high expectations, emotional hurt when you're young, you likely develop subconscious survival strategies. And the term survival basically is harking back to what I'm saying, where your system can't differentiate between emotionally painful things and physically painful things. So it is a form of survival, because if we're in environments and contexts where emotional pain happens at a threshold that a small child is not able to deal with, the system can see it as safeguarding from mental collapse, basically. So mental collapse will be seen as, of course, a danger, and it's safeguarding by stepping back into itself and making out these little protective little guardians. And those protective guardians are alarm systems, right? They're to avoid all of this pain. So in essence, a part of your psyche took on the role of a protective guardian, even if it was a very strict one. So in psychotherapy approaches like psychosynthesis, which is my modality by and large, as well as kind of neuro-based modalities, and another modality called internal family systems, the inner critic is seen as a sub-personality. Now, what I mean by that, and why that's going to be very important, spoiler alert, as we go through, is think of it like a sub-personality is going to be exceedingly helpful. So if you start to think of it as who you are, your Pat, your Mary, your Anya, your Chloe, your whoever. And there's all these different little characters of you that make up the orchestra of who you are. There's all these players playing together, right? So the way that I'd put that simply is you might be a son, a father, a brother, a friend, a manager, right? And you're still you, but different aspects of yourself come to the fore depending on the roles that you're playing day by day. So that's essentially a very simplified version of what a subpersonality is. All of these subpersonalities have different drivers. You might want different things, slightly different things. As a manager, you might conduct yourself in slightly different ways because different things are important to you than they would be as a friend down in the pub. You're still you. You still, all of the sum of your parts are who you are, but different aspects and facets have different little ways and eccentricities about them. So one psychologist poetically calls these inner critic the loyal soldier, which is a nicer way to think about it. Because if I think of this person following me around, criticizing me all the time, I'd want to give him a slap. Whereas if I think of a loyal soldier, depending, I might be a little bit more lenient. So they're a courageous, stubborn part that stepped up during your childhood to help you survive difficult emotional environments. Now, you may not have had a traumatizing life. You might have had a good life, but when we're small, we're extremely vulnerable and sensitive. So even though you say, "Jeepers, I don't know what," I'm looking back and lots of people have had it worse than I have. Yes, but you might have had little moments where your tiny psyche was just going, I don't know what to do with this. And something else stepped in. Right. So how did it protect you? It kept you small and acceptable. So it would berate you for being too much or not enough to prevent you from drawing negative attention. Now, this happens an awful lot in peer-to-peer friend groups, in very kind of micro hierarchical dynamics of small kids, which is fascinating in and of itself. So every time you hear the inner voice saying, "You're not good enough, you should be ashamed," that's your loyal soldier that's speaking up, trying to enforce rules that kept you out of harm's way previously. In many ways, the voice safeguarded you. It helped you to adapt and stay safe in a challenging environment. The problem is that the problem and the blessing, I suppose, is we grow up, right? So the loyal soldier keeps acting as if you're tiny and you can't make any decisions for yourself, and you're a tiny, blubbering, tiny baby mess going, I don't know what to do. So the war zone of childhood, lack of provisions of being able to cope, because that's essentially it. You can't cope as a child. You don't have the mechanisms. That's over for most of us. Touch wood, we have far more developed coping mechanisms as adults. Problem with that part is it doesn't realize that you're an adult, right? The only tools it knows is criticism, shame, and fear, thinking it's protecting you from that pain. Oftentimes it's taking on the voice of somebody else in your life. So oftentimes ask yourself, whose voice is this speaking in? Is it mine? Is it somebody else that I know? And what kids do, and they're very, very clever, is they think, if I anticipate the problem by taking on that person's voice, it's not going to hurt me anymore. Of course, that's not true, but God bless them, they're doing their best. So that protective part is like a bodyguard that hasn't been updated. It's still using the old tactics. And your goal now is to update the methods, because remember, you have a threat response built into your brain, right? It's what kept the human race safe from noises, predators, things that go bump in the night. Is that hyper vigilant state. But our goals is to adapt it to where you're at now, so that the tool and the software that you have matches the hardware, and that you're not running on Windows 97 or something like that. No shade to Windows 97, but I think it would drive me absolutely bonkers. So your protective defense mechanisms are working on outdated information instead of trying to squash the loyal soldiers, and the reason why I say that is it often backfires, because the part is inbuilt into your brain. Trying to pretend that it doesn't exist means you will oftentimes find yourself in a constant trying to stay ahead of that mechanism. Now, people use positive affirmations as a swap out, which works. It does work. But I often find getting the distance from the critical voice takes an awful lot of the emotional impact out of the messages that it gives you. So next step is reassigning or giving the protective part a new assignment, one that's going to integrate a lot better and be a lot healthier for you. So we know that there's the alarm system. We have our amygdala, it fires up stress hormones, cortisol, it prepares you for fight, flight, flee. In evolutionary terms, it has helped us keep protected. We trigger our own stress responses basically with our minds, which, you didn't need me to tell you that. So why would our minds evolve that way? So one reason is that self-criticism can be a crude form of motivation as well. So think of that kind of very mean football coach saying, toughen up, or a drill sergeant type of thing. When we fear we're falling short, the inner critic jumps in to hurt us just a little bit, right? It spurs us to change. So as one psychologist explains, whose name has evaded me unfortunately right now, even though the method is a little bit warped and clumsy, what self-criticism is actually trying to do is motivate you with pain and discomfort to take action. So it's stopping you from feel bad, and it's harnessing that part of you that knows that you can do more. And it's warping it and inverting it in ways that actually are a bit rubbish, to be honest. It's as if you'd a friend that you meant well and they've put on a lot of weight and they're not healthy, and instead of supporting them, you take on that fear and worry about your friend and you start to be a bit mean about their weight, right? You're going about it arseways, excuse my French, but the thought process and the driver comes from a good place. You're just kind of making a bit of a mess of it. Think of it a little bit that way. So what's the alternative? Instead of the stick, use the carrot, right? Instead of beating yourself into motivation, action, and, safety, we all like rewards a lot better, Our brain have an inbuilt soothing system. So caregiving, kindness, will set off the mammalian caregiving system, and it's the part of the brain that triggers feeling of safety and comfort. When we experience kindness, warmth, reassurance, we give off oxytocin and natural opioids. We feel good. So it's the difference between, we'll swap roles now. If you were that friend trying to lose weight, you can either go to your friend Sarah, who'll berate you into the ground, and she means well, or you can go to Catherine and she'll support you loads. And in both instances, both of them want you to do well. You want to do well. You want to harness the motivation to change. There are just different approaches, some that work better, some that work worse, which is why you might have heard of if a manager or a team lead or anybody is trying to get the best out of you, they'll often say, what's the best version of this that we can look at and how can we implement it, versus you're going to get in loads of trouble now if you don't do that properly. Totally different thing. Your whole system's going to balk at it and say, don't tell me what to do. This is horrible. So how do we actually decode our little inner, what did I call him a while ago? The loyal soldier. So our self-critical thoughts will find, if we know what they're trying to say to us, basically, we can actually get to the core of the change. So it starts with a stance of curiosity instead of shame. The next time you notice the inner critic piping up, saying, you're so lazy, you'll never get anything done in your life, rather than accepting the voice as truth, come back to what I said originally, or trying to shut it up, blah, 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 you don't exist, because it does exist, you're not a bury your head in the sand type of person. Call a spade, get in the reality of it. It does exist, actually. So it does exist, but does it mean that what it's saying is true? No, it is a system that was built on, God love us, a child's Lego set of what a brain that protects you and motivates you should look at. You're not a child, right? Observe it. Say, all right, I could see it happen there. Take a mental step back. You don't have to believe everything that's said. If I said to you, I am a Nigerian prince and you've just won €1,000,000. No, sorry, I'm leaving you €1,000,000. Please reply with your bank details. You'd say, go on away now, right? So treat it as if you're listening to a misguided friend. Ask yourself, what are you actually worried about now? If you'd your friend, what did I call her a while ago, Sarah, saying to you, you need to get running, I'm worried about you, this, that, and the other, you'd say, what are you actually worried about? What are you actually trying to protect me from? That's a whole different conversation. And that's the conversation you should be having with that part of you. So imagine you've procrastinated on a project and now the critic is shouting, you're useless, you always mess up, this is what happens every time. Right, you can take that on board and start to feel absolutely woeful about yourself as if you're a small child. Because let's be honest, when we hear these messages, we go back to child mode. We're no longer a 64-year-old, well, professional, this, that, and that. You're not. You're about 6 years of age and you go, okay, I'm sorry. I'm so bad. I'm so bad. And I'm making fun because if you bring humor into it and actually take the emotional charge and say, look, this affects me in real ways. I'm not taking that away from myself, but I know that if I can laugh at it, I take away some of the emotional charge and I say, God love us, you're only a smallie, come here now and I'll look after you. So what the critic is essentially terrified of is, if we don't finish this perfectly, we'll be humiliated and harmed. It handles the fear by whipping you with harsh words. And are you going to be humiliated for not being perfect? Probably not. Like, if you understand the real drivers, the real emotional drivers, the real messages behind the critic, and you actually give it the mental space to separate yourself. And a great way to do that is characterize it, right? Bring the humor into it a bit. It might be a loyal soldier, it might be a dusty old lady, right? Give it a name, give it a character, say, there you are again, now pettins. Right, what is it actually trying to say to you? When you separate yourself by creating a character, you're no longer enmeshed, right? I like to think of it as if you ever play video games. I hate them, but if you play video games, you can either see as if you were looking through the eyes of the character, or you can make it so that you see the little character running along. One of them is meant to immerse you in an experience. It's the same idea here. You can either be fully immersed in that inner critic, or you can watch it. It gives you a little bit of separatedness where all of a sudden you're your own person again. You can see it, you can watch it do its little thing, and you are you with autonomy, sovereignty, and all the different things. So as you're watching it, get curious about it. Get curious about the actual thing that it's worried about. And as an adult watching it, say, right, this must mean a lot to me. It must mean a lot to me that this part is coming up to protect me. Isn't that very interesting? Now, it's saying to me I'm lazy. I know I'm not lazy. And don't fall into the seduction of, just because you've thought something and it's very easy for you to think of it in the exact same way. Think of it differently. Think of it differently, which is so easy to say, but I promise when you characterize it and step away, you're disidentifying with it. It means that you're giving yourself the space to make decisions that you don't have if you become totally enmeshed. And now you know the mechanisms of it. You know what's happening. So recognize the critic's positive intent. Right, I'll give my little tag there for those. Oh, those still with us. Fantastic. There's people still with me. Thank you. I haven't bored people to tears. So what to do about it? We'll pop that in. What to do about it? Oops. That's not how you spell that. Right. What to do about it? Bam. Recognize the critic's positive intent. It's there for a reason. It's trying to help out. We know this. It's got a protective impulse. Right. Separate yourself from the critics. That's stage 2. Give it a name. Captain Safety. Worried William. Whatever it is. If you create an externalization, it's going to be a lot easier to give yourself space to make decisions. And if it's an entity, quote unquote, if it's a cartoon character, it can be anything at all. If it's something external, you can actually have a dialogue with it. You can say, what is it that you're looking for from me here? What you actually need from me here? And oftentimes, parts that were created as smallies were created because there was a need that was not met, right? And as an adult, you can fulfill that need. If you say, I just need a little bit of space, I need to feel like what I'm doing is having an impact. I need to feel like you have this. And you just say, I have it. I have it. I don't need you here. Thanks so much for your service. I actually have this. And change the language, right? So instead of saying I, we love me, we're like little babies, the whole world revolves around me. Change the language. A part of me, right? A part of me is saying, another part of me is saying, right? Giving yourself distance means that there's more to all of this than the one narrative that's being pushed. Meet your critic with curiosity and compassion, not anger. That's the most challenging step, but it's the most transformative. So instead of fighting with that inner critic or shaming yourself for having these thoughts, everybody has those thoughts. I mean this in the nicest way possible. You're not that special, love. Right? Everybody has these thoughts, right? Having the thoughts doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with you, right? It's the same mechanism as if you touch the iron, and you said, jeepers, I better not touch that. And when you're ironing, the next time you say, I need to be careful with the iron now because I put my hand on it. You having that thought doesn't mean that you're insane. It means that something hurt you before, and these thoughts are automatically coming in, right? So I hear you. What is it you're worried about right now? A part of me is worried about this right now. What are you afraid is going to happen if you didn't remind me of this? Having the habit of starting into an internal dialogue doesn't mean that you're absolutely batty. It means that you're aware of different aspects of yourself competing for your awareness and your attention for different reasons, right? So anger towards yourself only fuels the threat system further. It's a no-no, right? You don't want to put yourself in a state where that amygdala is hyper aroused, like very, very alert. The more angry and berating you get with yourself, the more sensitive that's going to be. Go in with the empathy, go in with the compassion. That diffuses that hugely. Introduce self-compassion and reality checking. Gentle but grounded, right? Is this actually as bad as I think it is? Put the thought on trial. I don't particularly like that saying, but it's a sticky way of remembering it. Are things as black and white terrible as you think that they are, or as the message it's giving you is? Probably not. There's always a middle ground with stuff. Consistently responding to yourself as you would with a friend, with encouragement and perspective, trains your brain to default to self-support rather than self-criticism. So you've built this gorgeous system of protection over a whole lifetime where this critic pops in. You can actually build it in the other direction. You can build it where support is the first port of call with this, and reassign your inner critic a new role, right? So, loyal soldiers back at it now. After thanking him for his service, the villagers give him a new role. He's the peacekeeper, blah, blah, blah. Everybody's happy, right? You can give your inner critic a healthier role as a discerning inner coach, right? So, one that helps you stay on track without resorting to name calling. If I started name calling all my clients, I'd be in terrible trouble. So, instead of saying you're too stupid to succeed at this, re-sketch in your mind's eye what that part is, right? It is a motivator, it is a coach, it is a drill sergeant, but its approach is slightly different. It can stay there, it can do its thing. It knows that you can do so much better with yourself. Fantastic, right? This task is challenging. Maybe we should prepare a little bit. Maybe we should work on the confidence aspect because you haven't been, whatever good advice you would give to a friend. That's the role that the inner critic is starting to mesh into. I'm not a fan of being delusional, right? And if any of my friends are watching this, they might break their necks, throwing their heads back laughing. But if you pretend something isn't happening, newsflash, it is, right? Don't be delusionalist. You have an inner critic. You now know why it's there. You now know that you can separate yourself from it. You now know exactly that it's pointing to something exceedingly vulnerable and important. You can rewire an awful lot of that. It is your map and guiding system to actually getting to the root of what you actually need support with. Don't let it steal the narrative as if you're having a conversation with somebody and they start going in a totally different way. You're worried about a project and it starts talking to you that you're lazy, and you've always been since the age of a child, and you go, hang on, now I'm going to have to argue this instead of doing what I'm doing. Do not let it run away with it. Rewire it. Right, that's me. I'm out of time. I hope you found this helpful. If you have any questions, please pop them into the comment section. Always love hearing from people. I hope you found this helpful, which I've already mentioned, and have a lovely rest of your day, guys. See you next week. Bye.